Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at this open lecture on AI, artificial intelligence. Tonight, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and its opportunities and challenges. And we're going to be doing that with two distinguished speakers. Our first speaker is going to be RSM Professor Ting Li, and our second speaker is going to be Deloitte Consulting partner Stefan van Duin. We're going to be discussing a lot of things. We want to get into a lot of topics. We want to really dive into some of the issues here. We're going to be talking about the latest advances in AI technology, and we're going to be looking at what competitive advantages companies have that use AI to their benefit. And we're going to be doing that in hopefully what is going to be a very lively and engaging discussion. I will be the moderator of this discussion. I will be your host tonight. My name is Victor Vlam, and it's very much an honor to be here today. We're also with a lot of people here because for this edition of the Open Lecture, we had nearly 1,000 people sign up. We're very happy that all of you are here today. And obviously, we can't meet everyone, but we did ask you a question about your background. And as you can see right here, we have quite a diverse audience. About 50% is already connected to RSM in some way. They are, for example, former students. There's a lot of staff here as well. There are also a lot of students here. 20% of the people in the audience watching right now is a student. A lot of people here came through the lectures and the promotion that Professor Ting Li did, so especially a warm welcome to her students. But there are also a lot of people here who do not necessarily have a connection to RSM yet, and we're obviously very happy to say welcome to all of you as well. We asked you about your background, a lot of different backgrounds, but the most prominent ones are these: people from education, people from IT, and people from a consulting background. Again, we want to say welcome to everyone. We're very glad that you are here for this open lecture. This is actually the second open lecture in a series of 4 open lectures, and these are all part of a 50th anniversary celebration of RSM as the first academic business school in the Netherlands. We're going to give you dates on the other lections at the end of today, so if you enjoyed this one, we're also more than happy to invite you for the next lectures in November. I want to also mention here, we have a very simple format for this open lecture. We're going to have 2 speakers up here that are going to give a talk about the topic they are passionate about and on which they are an expert. But we also want to get your input as much as possible. In fact, we very much appreciate it that if you have questions, please write them down right there on your screen. There's a possibility for you to ask these questions. I'm going to be posing as many of your questions as possible in the discussion that we're going to have in the second half of today's session. So basically that's the format. The speakers are also going to be asking you questions so you can participate as much as possible so we can make it as interactive and fun as possible. All right, it's time to get started, ladies and gentlemen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are very happy to have her as our first speaker here today. When it comes to artificial intelligence, she's the absolute expert. She's a professor of digital business at RSM, and she was also named one of the top 40 professors under 40 worldwide in 2017. Ting Li, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Artificial intelligence, the intelligence demonstrated by machines, is everywhere. It is in our phones, cars, online search, dating, banks, and all over the media. In the coming years, the global GDP will increase by 15%, all thanks to AI. Visionary physicist Stephen Hawking explained, everything that civilization has to offer is a product of human intelligence. And success in creating AI will be the biggest event in human history. There are many definitions of AI out there. I want to distinguish 2 of them. One is what we call strong AI, machines that can think and act in a way that matches or even surpasses human intelligence. The other one is what we used in this talk. Any activity computers are able to perform that humans once performed. That's what we call weak AI. Over the last years, we have seen 4 major areas in which modern businesses are using AI to create value: automation, better decisions, personalization, and positive change. Before I give you my examples, I'd like to see how your organizations use AI to create value today. You can find the questions on your screen, and please answer those questions. And it will shortly come back to the answers you give to us. First, we have seen a growing use of AI in automating the jobs that we used to do manually, ranging from chatbots used in airlines to robotic process automation used in auditing firms, to logistic companies that use AI deliveries through drones and autonomous technologies and robots. In supply chains, for instance, AI helps increase efficiencies and decrease cost through demand forecasting, production planning, and predictive maintenance. Second, better decisions. The healthcare industry has always been a leader in innovation. The constant mutating of disease and virus make it very difficult to stay ahead of the curve. But with the help of AI and machine learning algorithms, it continues to advance, not only accurately identifying diagnoses in images, but creating new treatments and helping people live longer and healthier lives. Personalization. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the recommendations of Amazon, Spotify, and Netflix. But not only big tech firms, but nearly all businesses are competing for customer attention online by increasing product and message relevance through deeper personalization. Companies increasingly tailor the right product and the right messages to you based on your past browsing behavior, including what you searched and bought in the past and what you may be looking to buy, through not only your own behavior, but also the behavior of the friends that you interacted with. Beyond all the previously mentioned benefits, AI is also applied to create positive change to society. In the public sector, for instance, municipalities around the world have deployed many AI applications as part of smart city initiatives. A large amount of data is being collected, effectively creating a digital twin of the city. The generated analytical insights, ranging from traffic circulation to parking enforcement, creating value for citizens and society at large. Many new AI applications are underway to solve grand challenges in domains such as education, ocean health, renewable energy. Strategies are slowly shifting away from traditional differentiation based on cost, quality, brand, and specialized expertise, and towards advantages like business network position, the accumulation of unique data, and the deployment of sophisticated analytics. And the ways digital and AI are used today only accelerate these changes. Let's look at a few of them. Customers. They are no longer just mass market. Instead, they are the key influencers and dynamic network. Competition is no longer happening among fixed set of firms within a given industry. Instead, we see competitions happen across fluid industries without boundaries. Data is continuously generated everywhere. Particularly unstructured data is increasingly usable and valuable. And value in data is in connecting and integrating across different silos. Innovation processes are also rapidly changing. Decisions are now made based on testing and validating, and focus has shifted from minimum viable product and prototypes. The last one, value proposition, is now defined by changing customer needs and AI-enabled businesses to uncover the next opportunity for customer value. And in my interactions with tens of companies over the last decade, I find there are 4 major areas that are particularly important for organizations to successfully embrace AI. First and foremost, operating model. You want to be asking the question, how the processes are organized to create value for your customers, and how and where can AI contribute to that mission? It's a question of how to embed the intelligence in software across the organization and connect them both to internal and also external users. On the data side, businesses need to work on semi-automated process that gathers, cleans, integrates, and safeguards data in a systematic, sustainable, and scalable way. Algorithms, they generate predictions about future states or actions of the business. And this analytics can systematically convert internal and external data into predictions, insights, choices, which in turn guide and automate operational workflows. It's key to develop rapid experimentation capabilities and also platforms on which hypotheses regarding new algorithms are tested to ensure that your suggestions are having the intended effect. What we have seen is just the tip of the iceberg in the increasing use of AI. Although AI has started to show positive effects across different industries, it also comes with many challenges. Here is a graph. It shows you only in 2018, a range of unexpected adverse consequences has affected society at many different levels. I'm going to discuss 5 broad categories of challenges ahead: biases, unreliability, black box, misinformation, and privacy. At their best, AI can be used to augment human judgment and reduce both conscious and also unconscious biases. However, there's a growing consensus that the way AI systems are designed, along with the data used to train those algorithms, perpetuate and amplify the same biases already present in our culture, leading to even more discrimination. For example, Amazon uncovered a big problem. The new recruiting engine did not like women. They built a program to review job applicants' CVs. However, the model was trained by observing patterns in CVs submitted in the past 10 years. Most came from men, a reflection of male dominance across the tech industry. And of course, once they find out, they abandon the system. But as such, AI caused biased decision-making that could result in the discrimination of certain populations. Although latest advances in AI improved accuracy and efficiency, smart algorithms are inherently uncertain, as there's no machine learning technique that is 100% accurate. It means that sometimes errors happen. And this is especially pragmatic when algorithms make bad decisions on important things. For example, a self-driving Uber car kills a pedestrian, and that happened in Arizona. In the UK, a flawed algorithm used voice recognition system to detect immigration fraud, led to the government to deport thousands of students in error. IBM Watson recommended unsafe and incorrect cancer treatment. Knowing that no algorithm can be correct 100% of the time, an important question remains for society. How many machine errors are acceptable when they can potentially ruin human lives? Certain algorithms are hard to link decisions to inputs meaningfully, which makes it really, really hard, even for creators, to explain how they work, leaving the people affected by their decisions completely in the dark. For example, the crime predicting algorithm. Defendants are not able to question the process by which their scores was calculated. And in healthcare, a program could suddenly cut hours of caretaker for people with heavy disabilities without any valid reason to do so, leaving both people affected by the decision and the people using the tool difficult to understand why. Another challenge that is more pronounced lately is misinformation and fake news, which seem to spread faster than the virus in this pandemic. Empowered by AI, we are seeing a rise of a tremendous wave of synthetic information, fake photo, fake audio, fake video that is very, very convincing to our human eye. The improved techniques and technology have made it so much easier for people to create fake information and to disseminate it, which could disrupt our election, our economy, and our health. Privacy is certainly under pressure in digitized societies. We have seen massive personalization happening at scale, but may come at the cost of privacy. Personalization increases content relevance, but simultaneously triggers privacy concerns as companies make use of consumers' information. European Union made a great first step in that direction with its GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, and established strict protections of consumer data. Such well-intended legislation, while very important, may impede assessment and also interfere with commercial advances for machine learning and data processing, which increasingly comprise a greater portion of the global economies. Okay, let me conclude here. These challenges are worrying, but they should not stop us from pursuing greater opportunities. Instead, we should be working on ethical and responsible AI. And we should advocate the art of AI, a design for value approach to make sure that human values and ethical principles and their priorities and choices are explicitly included in the design processes in a transparent and systematic manner. Accountability are being able to explain and justify decisions, and responsibility, who should decide which values should be considered and how should they be prioritized, and how do we deal with dilemmas. Transparency, understand the ways systems make decisions and to the data being used. And these are very complex issues, which require close collaborations among different communities of scholars, executives, policymakers, engineers, and students from multidisciplinary areas of computer science, social science, law, and humanities. We need to come together to design solutions and test approaches guided by theory and validated by experiment, and so that we can tackle these issues and challenges that are important to a brighter path forward. With that, I thank you. And that's the end of the presentation.
All right, Ting, thank you very much for that presentation. We have an audience Q&A that we would like to get your input on, and we have it up on the screen here. What are the challenges for your organization to embrace AI? So tell us your answer. We're very curious to hear exactly what that is. Fill it in, and we're going to get a word cloud out of that, and we're going to see in a moment what those answers are. Ting, if I may ask you to speculate, what do you expect to be one of the challenges that people are going to be naming?
So I think at the moment, what we have heard from the participants, for instance, in the course that we teach business participants, they often refer to, there's not enough of leadership within the organization to actually take on those opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's leadership to actually just get it done. We actually have the answers right here on the screen. They're also on my screen. I can't read them because they're significantly too small. Let me see if we can make that slightly bigger, perhaps. We can't make it bigger. All right. The audience is seeing exactly what those words are. We can't see them. But I want to say, everyone, these are probably fascinating answers. So thank you very much for that. Nonetheless, we are going to move on to our second presentation. Thank you, by the way, very much, Ting. We very much appreciated hearing your presentation. It's time, nonetheless, to move on to our second speaker. And we're also very happy to have him here because we were introduced to sort of the opportunities and challenges of AI. But here now is somebody who actually has experience in helping companies to implement AI. His name, as I said earlier, is Stefan van Duin. He's a partner analytics and cognitive at Deloitte Consulting. He's also an RSM alumnus, and he's basically an expert in the area of data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all those kinds of things that are very relevant here. So he's going to make it practical to some extent. How do you implement AI in your company? Stefan.
Thank you, Victor. And it's great to be back here at RSM, where I've spent 2 great years doing the EMBA. My key message today is artificial intelligence is becoming pervasive. And that means that it's getting out of the proof of concept pilot zone, it's getting into industrialized, used at scale. So that basically also means that we're getting out of the early adopter phase and we're getting into the early majority phase. And to back that up, I would like to discuss a little bit our research that we conducted through 2,700 companies around the globe. And the question is, why do we think it's becoming pervasive? That has a lot to do with the availability of the technology. It's readily available in a lot of software solutions that are out there, also in the great cloud platforms, and it means that sort of the barriers to start and to scale are becoming much less. And also the thing is that more people are actually getting familiar with the concepts of AI and starting to think about how they can apply in day-to-day business. Now about this research. So this is actually the 3rd year in a row that we conducted a global research where we interviewed and questioned over 2,700 organizations around the globe. Most of them, or basically the scope of us, is organizations that have more than $50 million of revenue. And if you see it has a global scope, even 100 companies in the Netherlands participated in this survey. And we asked them about their adoption of AI. How are they using it? How are they planning to use it? How are they organized? What are the biggest concerns, etc. So a little bit about those. The first thing we use the results of this questionnaire is basically to cluster these organizations into 3 major parts. So we have starters. And the starters means that they actually have started to look at it, maybe have conducted a few proof of concept here and there, have very limited skills in the company, but actually started to hire certain skilled people, but basically in the very early stage of adopting AI. The biggest group in the middle is skilled, and that means you have probably a couple of applications up and running in your organization. You're actually applying it in practice. You have maybe a team, maybe more teams of a couple of skilled people. So you're starting to learn how to do this and how to apply this. And as you can see, it's roughly half of the population in our survey. And then we have what we call the seasoned adopters. And these are really, this is the group that is sort of front runner group. So they have a high number of applications at scale in production, and they have their own capabilities and a good team that can do this. And when we look at this, we can actually see a little bit of the trends amongst these things. But before I continue, I would like to also ask you to answer that question: how do you rank your organization's AI adoption? If you can see this. And I don't know if you can see the answers at screen, but we'll come back to that later in the discussion and to see where you guys are. Now, a couple of things, if we want to look at how companies are applying AI, at least the ones that have adopted AI, basically you see they're pushing the boundaries of what is possible with AI. I come back to that. They are creating new stuff, so they're looking at opportunities to start new products, new businesses. And they're expanding the circle. And that means, and we'll see that AI often starts somewhere in the business, and a lot of times it's actually IT that starts experimenting, but slowly they're expanding the circle and making it bigger in the organization. And that is a big trend, what we see. Now, also the technologies that Ting talked about before. And this is an amazing result. What we see is, if you look at the big families of AI solutions, it could be either machine learning or deep learning, it could be natural language processes or computer vision. You see that a lot of companies are actually applying the technology in practice. So machine learning is now already in 2/3 of the companies used in practice. And that also indicates that we're getting out of this early adopter phase. But you see, if we ask the companies, what are you planning to use next year? They're almost unanimous. So almost unanimously, they are looking at technologies to apply it next year, which is, I think, an amazing result. And we saw also in the third year of a row, we see this number increasing and increasing. And that is also supporting the message that AI is actually becoming pervasive. Just a couple of examples: natural language processing. You'll see that in chatbots, in automated response systems, in expert systems that are looking at documents or other unstructured data. Computer vision, you can see that in facial recognition, object detection using computer camera technology, and we see a lot of great applications in that area. Now, also what we ask companies, what are you actually using it for? So what is your main goal? And we also ask them, how are they using it now, and where do they see the highest impact in their companies? And actually you see, it's the top response is making processes more efficient, is actually the one response that is most outstanding. That is the number one trigger for most companies to start. But if you see, we'll also see that later and later, more other topics come into mind. You can talk about improving decision making, developing new products and services. Those are kind of the things that come to mind. And the interesting part is, if you look at the starters, the skilled and the seasoned companies, that you see that is actually shifting. So for starters, making processes more efficient, but actually the trigger of lowering costs, that is a major trigger to start with AI. So most of the companies are looking at ways to save costs and save money. But if you look through the skilled and seasoned, you see that especially that lowering cost trigger is actually moving away from the top priorities. And what comes in place is creating new products and services. You can think about a supermarket that launches a service for personalized diets. You can look at the manufacturer of sporting shoes that launches a service for personalization of the shoe manufacturing. There are plenty of examples of actually companies inventing new ways of bringing their products and services to market, and that becomes the number one trigger for the seasoned AI adopters. Now, the next question is, how do you actually organize and what makes the seasoned adopters successful? What we see is leveraging a diverse team, a team that brings together many different skills, coming from business, from technology, from IT, ways to implement it, bring them together and make sure that this is a broad topic that is supported by the full company. Actually taking a centralized approach. And you may wonder why, because most of the AI initiatives start like a proof of concept or an experiment somewhere. But we see that to really make it successful at scale, you need a centralized approach. That means you need to think about it in a strategic way and think about what is the highest impact, what you need to do to organize it. And also the focus on integrating and scaling. That means it's great to start with a proof of concept or a pilot somewhere, but you need to think about it. How do I scale this? How do I industrialize this? And how do I, because that means that you need to develop with a different mindset. It basically needs to start from scratch in thinking about how to move it forward. And those are a couple of the success factors that we saw in the seasoned companies and are recognized from practice. Now, we also asked the respondents, so what are your biggest concerns if you look about implementing AI? Because concerns are there. And basically, they could only pick one, by the way. Basically, the answer that was most prominent was safety concerns. So most companies are really concerned about safety breaches in the AI systems. Is there a way to hack it? Is there a way to influence it, etc.? That's there. But also the lack of explainability. That's referring to the black box approach that Ting talked about earlier. So if you have these algorithms that's taking decisions and it's a black box algorithms, how can you actually open the box and control it? Because if you cannot see how it works, you cannot control it. A lot of companies also talked about the potential elimination of jobs. But in fact, if you see the actual effect of that, that's actually quite limited because we also see a lot of new jobs emerging. Potential bias of AI algorithm is also in the top list here. And that's also talking about how do we make sure that the algorithms we use in practice are not trained in error, and how do you actually control that so you get rid of unwanted answers. And this actually calls for a couple of recommendations, again, from the seasoned adopters. Align risk-related efforts. It basically means that you need to think about your risk framework as a company. AI is not a siloed, separate topic. It basically is integrated in the rest of your company, so you also need to think about your risk framework in an aligned way. But also challenge your vendors, either the software companies, the consulting companies, and ask them how they are dealing with those risks. How are they making sure that the algorithms they are developing are not biased and are actually transparent. And also take a close look at the regulatory efforts. What we see, there's a lot of legislation being developed, both at EU level and in local governments. And it's also good to take a good look at that. Not to wait for it, because it can take a while before it's there, but if you can see the direction that is taken, it also gives you a certain amount of confidence if you are approaching it in the right way. So those are a couple of the things. I would like to close off with the final thought here. So the message here, AI is there to stay, is becoming pervasive. So don't think about it as an experiment. Think about it, how can you apply it to develop new products and services, and how can you apply it at scale within your company. And with that, I'll leave it for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, for that talk. We have another audience question I'd like to pose to everyone here. We'd like to get your answers to the questions. What actions do you think societies should focus on in adopting AI? We're going to see if we can get these answers in a word cloud. You can type them now. Before we get to those answers, I also want to get to an earlier question that you posed in your talk. You asked people whether they are starter, skilled, or seasoned when it comes to AI. What do you expect from the audience before I give you the results?
I expect the results to be a little bit biased. I'm expecting, because probably the audience is somehow familiar, so I'm probably a little bit biased towards the skilled and seasoned.
A lot of skilled. It's actually the other way around.
Wow.
About 75% of the people consider themselves to be starters. About 5% consider them to be themselves to be skilled, and the other people, 20%, about 20%, consider themselves to be seasoned when it comes to AI.
It's actually interesting, and I'm not sure, but we saw also in the results of the survey that especially in the Netherlands and also in Europe, we were definitely lacking behind compared to the rest of the world. So apparently we have something to do.
So it does make some sense. We have some catching up to do, exactly. Are you surprised by these results, Ting?
I'm actually happy to see those results because that means there is a value in an educational institution like us to actually train those people who are lagging behind, right?
Yes, that's absolutely true. There's a reason to be educated. Let's see if we can get the results for the other questions that we posed. What actions do you think society should focus on in adopting AI? Let's see if we can get a word cloud up, and let's see if that is possible to make it legible here. We're compiling the results, as they say. There we go. Here we go. We have the word cloud here. Again, this is not necessarily I'm not able to read this. The font is too small. People might be asking, why can't I read it? There's a prompter right there in front of the camera, but we have some font issues. It's rather small. I'm not sure if anybody else can read it. Stefan, you're sitting...
Good eyes for this.
I put 20 vision too. It's not my fault here, ladies and gentlemen. Think you're sitting very close. Can you read it by any chance?
Not from where I sit.
Yes, exactly.
No, sorry.
The only reason I asked this is to make sure that I'm not at fault here, and that we have established now. Yeah. Let's talk about exactly what those challenges are. Let me actually start with you, Ting. What do you think societies need to implement to make sure that we are ready in adopting AI?
So one domain that we have seen that companies and also society are very busy with is the sector that we are in, is the education. Yeah. And basically because of also COVID, and we're throwing into the digital transformation that we have talked about basically over a decade, yeah. Right? But suddenly overnight, we have to bring, Erasmus University, we have 30,000 students. We have to bring the education online, and not even a blended form that is possible, right? So to do that education for higher education online, 100%, does actually have a lot of challenge. Exactly. For the university and for the staff and for the students as well.
Exactly. And has AI changed education?
So one thing, for instance, now we are pushed to do, and we're definitely going to spend, also time and effort in doing, is more personalized learning. So that's also connecting, one of the value that I was talking about earlier, and looking at, okay, what are the background the student already have? Yeah. If they are very strong in math, or that they're very strong in psychology, economics versus programming, then perhaps they don't have to take those basic courses, can actually have a jump start. Exactly. In the rest of the curriculum.
So basically the same way that Amazon tells me and gives me recommendations for certain products I would buy based on my personal history, essentially the education system can give me recommendations for which courses I should and should not take.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So education is one of the things that societies need to look to get themselves ready for AI. Stefan, what are some of the other things that societies need to do?
So I actually would say in general there are two parts. So the one part is how do you sort of control and audit it? I think that's one part where you also see a lot of the buzz around. It needs to be transparent, it needs to be explainable, trustworthy, etc. But I also would like to focus on the other part, which is actually society can also think about how can we invest in AI to actually get benefit out of that. Yeah. If you look, and we talked about a couple of the examples, but if you look at the impact in healthcare, but you can also talk about the impact in services towards the citizens. But you also think about producing food. That's one of the areas, especially in the Netherlands, where we are very strong in. And also there, using AI and machine learning can actually help you benefit a lot and also make it more sustainable. And as a society, also in Europe, we need to think about what are the areas where we want to invest in. Yeah. Obviously, when we talk about competition against US and China, we're not at the first place when adopting AI, but we need to think about where do we focus and where can we actually get the benefits.
So setting priorities is crucial here. That's what we need to do. And how about legislation? Because some of the things you both talked about, and Ting, you talked about, for example, self-driving cars. Sometimes they need to make a decision about whether they're going to kill maybe 2 passengers or 5 pedestrians. I would imagine that there would be laws guiding how those algorithms that make those decisions are written.
Well, sadly, I think Stefan would also come back to this point. And there's a lack of regulation and also legislation in this area.
Yeah.
So, but the research have actually shown a lot of accuracy brought by AI is more accurate actually by human decisions, right? And talking about self-driving cars and the mistakes those AI make by driving it around and by itself, still more accurate. And the accident rate is lower compared to the human driving.
Yeah. Stefan?
And of course, I'm not a lawyer, so you need to be a bit careful. But what you see is it's extremely complicated. So mention you have a car which contains software. And the software could be coming from another company than the car itself. It can be updated overnight. Who controls it? I mean, who gets to see what is in that software? And then if something happens, so is it the software? Is it the hardware, like the car? Is it the owner of the car? It becomes very complicated to get rules and regulations. And I think that now you also see that legislation is normally also lagging behind here a little bit. And that's in this case also the case, I guess.
So we essentially need to update our regulations when it comes to those things. That's what you're saying. We actually have a question from the audience that I want to get in because this actually relates to this point. It was mentioned that AI can take over repetitive work that is now done by humans. How do you see the balance between work and free time in the future? Will we have a 20-hour work week? That seems like a really nice idea to me, to have a 20-hour work week. I'm sure you guys would enjoy that as well. Is that something that's in our future?
Personally, I think so. I think that's definitely possible. So I looked it up, but about 100 years ago, we actually had a 6-day work week of around 60 hours in average here in the Netherlands. And currently, I think we're not even getting to 32 or something on average. So actually, you see already with technology, we have created for ourselves more spare time, and actually we have increased wealth.
Exactly.
And I think actually that trend will continue. But I would also see that we also can redirect some of our capabilities to other things. Providing personal care, etc. In hospitality, we are in need for people in healthcare. So there are a couple of things where we can actually move some of the existing jobs and getting to that capacity. And I'm a strong believer that it will benefit us all.
Yes, it seems like a really great idea. There's another question that we have from one of the people in the audience, and they are asking for examples for companies who are at the seasoned level, who are very experienced when it comes to AI. What would an example be of one of those companies? Can you guys give that, Ting? Yes?
So, for instance, we both talk about different stages of AI use, right? So you're talking about at the beginning, firms using it for automation, and then they move to changing the current product, and then they move to generating new product. And the last level, probably the companies using AI to actually change their processes and even change their business model. And one example I can give it to you is in the financial services industry. And BBVA is a bank, and they started thinking about not just selling insurance product. Take car insurance, for instance, not selling just car insurance product, but instead they're thinking about how to organize this life event for consumer that's buying a car. Then how can we help them to actually choose a car and provide the car options and organize finance and also mortgage? And then the last thing is how to get a car insurance. So the business model has really changed from selling their car insurance, but then towards how to organize and satisfy customer needs, that is buying a car.
Yes.
So the entire business model is actually enabled by AI.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is one of the banks that's highly digital and highly AI enabled.
Exactly. Stefan?
Maybe to add to that, and I'm not going to name any company names because but in general you could say that digital native companies are most of the times most ahead because they.
So you're not naming them, but the companies that you're talking about are Google, Microsoft, those types of companies.
You name them,
yes.
The digital native companies. So those are most of the times because they have it in the DNA basically. From the start they are basing themselves on data analysis, artificial intelligence, etc. What we see now, and also what we are currently working on, there are actually a couple of what we call, let's say, existing companies that are actually getting close. And we see a couple of interesting initiatives when a bank that is starting a digital, basically a company startup. So they're actually developing a completely new service inside the company, but approaching it as a startup. And those are the sort of the successful examples that we see here.
Exactly. All right, that's definitely very interesting. I think for many people it's good to realize that AI is actually a lot closer than we think, because most people have a mobile phone. We have Siri or whatever your brand is. That's essentially artificial intelligence as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
I also would like to make the statement, if you would have shown someone your navigation system in the 1980s, they would probably consider it
their
AI.
mind. Yeah, exactly.
So that's also the message, that it's becoming pervasive. It's something that is embedded in everything we do, and we will recognize it more and more.
Yes, exactly. Yes. All right, that is very interesting. Let's go to how AI is sort of changing our society. If you look at what's currently happening, Ting, how will society, how will we as perhaps consumers or perhaps as entrepreneurs, how will our society, our surroundings change in the coming years due to AI?
I think a lot of things become extremely intelligent. So that's the thing that I think people didn't realize. We touched upon this already, like Google search, and there's AI in there. And Siri and the voice assistant at home, the Alexa, those are AI in there.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that surrounded us in our life, those are all AI enabled.
Yeah.
But later what we'll see is a lot of this intelligence actually tagged with cloud, in the cloud. And the intelligence, let's say that somebody is disabled and there's artificial arm. The arm is not just me that connecting the arm and make it move. In fact, the arm is enabled with all those data and stored in the AI. The AI is making the arm to make the move that's so intelligent.
Yeah.
I'm just giving a trigger.
Exactly.
Right? So a lot of those things that you can actually think about it goes way beyond our imagination.
One of the thing is, there's an audience question I think is very relevant to this particular point, because we hear a lot of American examples. You mentioned before that we sort of lag behind, especially here in the Netherlands. Is there a reason that we lag behind? Is there a reason why other countries are ahead of us, Ting?
Well, that's a very interesting discussion. So we usually talk about those three clusters of countries or communities. And one is what we have the European Union. And as far as data privacy concerned, which is certainly one of the reasons why we are a little bit lagging behind, because of strict consumer protection policy, like GDPR that I talk about, right? So there, because it's very strict, I think the stringest privacy policy over the last 20 years, that does actually cast some shadow on the economic development and also use of data for firms and also for government. Because even auditing and assessment of all the platforms becomes very pragmatic.
Exactly.
And then on the other hand, other extreme that you have China, that has fast development because China government also supporting it, empowered the companies to do a lot of research. There are high entrepreneurial spirit in there. So development extremely fast, especially when it comes to application. And America is somewhere in between. They started privacy policy actually at the beginning of January this year, California Privacy Act. That's one of the first. But then it's more or less happening at the state level, but not federal level. So they are trying to some sort of having a harmonization compared to the European GDPR, but then also looking into the China because they see the benefit of having a loose, connected, hand-waving policy regulation. So it's not so much, certain on where that we all go with this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to get another audience question in, but we're getting some really great questions. Thank you very much for that, by the way. This question reads as follows. To the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. How do we go about determining where AI would add true value? Stefan, this seems like to be the heart of your expertise.
Yeah.
What would your answer be to this question?
First, thanks of all for whoever who posted this. I think this is the essential question here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a couple of answers. You really need to think about it from the values of your company. So basically, what is it that you're famous for, or what is it that you want to bring to your consumers? I totally agree. So for example, if you're a grocery supermarket, your main job is to feed people, basically to give them their day-to-day. And then you can think about, from that perspective, how can we change this service for the better? So make it more convenient, less of a hassle, provide inspiration or personalization. And then the AI question comes into place. But I think, therefore, it's very important to start from a strategic thinking So it's great to experiment here and there and to try little pilots, but if you really want to make an impact, you need to start from the top and really think about what is our value proposition towards the market and how can we benefit from this.
Exactly.
And to add to that, because I think that's also one of the secrets why these digital natives are so successful, because that's what they did.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
they were very clear on that.
They were very clear on that. We have another question because there are apparently people who are looking to really sort of get started with AI to implement it right away. Here's somebody who says, as a small business owner, I am looking at AI as an opportunity to gain a competitive advantage. Do you have any advice in general on how to get started? Now, obviously, we do not know what his or her business is, so we can't give, in that sense, personal advice. We can't look at their personal value proposition. But in general, is there advice that you would give to this person?
That is very hard, of course. It will be very generic. But if you are a small company and you don't have the means that the larger company have to do big investments or to hire skilled people, I would personally look at available solutions, so software.
Yeah.
So a lot of the software vendors have actually embedded AI into their solutions, and then it's readily available out of the box, and you can implement it. It will not be as easy as it sounds now, but I think that will be a thing to consider.
Right, exactly. So basically start at a low level, start just with anything basically out of the box, and then you can sort of experiment with that and gain knowledge about the topic.
And gain knowledge, yeah, and see.
What would also be very important and to realize is try to focus on your process, right? So what do you do? And how do you get to, end product or maybe end process? And then try to really disentangle where is the waste, where is the cost, and how can I actually save the cost and cut the waste, right? And maybe some of the AI or some of the automation, that's where most of the firms started with, and can be actually replaced with some intelligence in software.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what they should focus on, get started.
Yeah, I think for many people, it is at first, at least, a way to do some cost reduction. And I think if I'm understanding both of you correctly, is that you need to look broader to exactly what you need to do. It's not just about cost reduction.
So I would say it doesn't matter it's a good idea to start there. I mean, I'm not against cost reduction. But you see, if you really want to make an impact, you need to think beyond cost reduction. But you see a lot of companies, that's also what the survey showed, are actually using cost reduction as the first use case to get things going, and that's perfectly okay.
Exactly. Is there still a competitive advantage? Because one of the things you mentioned in your presentation was that a lot of companies are currently doing it. I'm sure there is still a competitive advantage, but I think you could also perhaps argue that that competitive advantage is disappearing because a lot of companies are starting to use it now.
Yes, but I think the competitive advantage is in the creativity. So if you come up with an idea in how to apply it and in a way like we talked about, in really how can you improve your service or come up with a new service, I think there's a lot of competitive advantages to gain. And you see some great examples in there. So last week I heard about a company that's using data to get personalized clothing advice. So those are the kind of things, and you can really build either new companies with that, or you can conquer a piece of the market that is not grabbed yet. And I think there's still a great opportunity.
Yeah, agree. So this is what we call reimagination. Reimagining you process, your product, and how you would actually satisfy your customer. Right. So you satisfy your customer in a given way, but why can't you just reimagine what customers really need?
Exactly.
And how can I reorganize some of the activities in an alternative way that can produce the end product really can satisfy the customer.
And that's usually the sign of a good entrepreneur. If you're not just looking to do the exact same thing as you're doing now, but just slightly better, but just sort of taking a whole different perspective and seeing if you can do it the entirely new way, because that might be something that is beneficial to people. We asked it during your talk, how does your company use AI to create value? I have the answers up here. Ting, what do you expect from those answers? What do you expect people to say to that question?
I think a lot of people would say automation. A lot of people will say better decisions, and the rest will come somewhat lower. Personalization and societal benefit.
It's actually quite interesting because it's a better decision is actually the one that most people argued is how their company uses AI to create value today. So that has about a 40% score, and the second one is automation and personalization and positive change, and they're roughly equal in that sense. So better decisions is the one that is the most popular answer there. People use AI to make better decisions. How about you, Stefan? Surprised?
I wasn't really. I think it's most of it is sort of in sync with the results of the survey that we talked about. But I was also thinking about automation being a bit higher. But you could also argue better decisions is also, that's a broad topic, of course, and the better decision often also leads to either cost reduction or optimization, etc. So
that's definitely true. That's definitely true. I think one of the interesting things that when it comes to making better decisions, I think sometimes AI is able to make decisions better that we did not even know we could make better. I think we were talking about this before, Ting, that deforestation, for example. You gave this great example about how AI is used to determine where deforestation is taking place, right?
I think that's one of the projects you work on,
Yes.
right?
yeah. It's actually one of the projects we're working on. So basically,
this is your project.
Yes. So it's basically taking satellite images and basically. So the thing is, using satellite images, you can take pieces of 15 square meters, more or less, and you can analyze and see what the picture has. And that means you can direct your people, in this case from the World Wildlife Foundation, to those areas where there's the biggest chance of something illegal going on. And I think, so first of all, AI can be more accurate than humans. There's a lot of examples in that. But it doesn't get tired.
Right.
So even after looking at thousands or millions of photos, it doesn't get tired and will continue. And most humans will get tired.
Exactly. Yes. We do tend to have that attribute. All right. We're almost at the end of this discussion. You guys are some of the biggest experts on AI in the Netherlands. Have you personally used AI to improve your lives in any way? Ting, can I ask you that question as the first here?
I think voice assistant is something that I use frequently, and same goes to my two boys at home. And
so you use
Alexa.
Siri or Alexa? Yes.
And the first thing in the morning when I say, Alexa, good morning, Alexa will tell me the weather and traffic, and I tend to ask her what's in my news briefing.
Exactly.
And Alexa will tell me, the U.S. Election going on, and what's the news with Trump and all of that. So that's something we enjoy a lot.
So the first thing in the morning is, good morning, Alexa, what's the latest news? What are the headlines? And then it gives you the headlines, you ask for your agenda, all those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Yes. Did you used to have a personal assistant that's actually a human?
No. So I started with Alexa, and I enjoyed her service.
Exactly. You appreciate it enrich your lives in many ways.
Absolutely.
How about you, Stefan?
So I'm not stealing the same example, but also I have a user of voice, but I have a very funny one. So I was talking to my wife about growing a beard. And so the question is, how would it look on me when I grow a beard? So I used an AI app to simulate that and to show my face with a beard. As you can see, the result is
it wasn't very positive, I take it.
It wasn't a very positive side, but that's a very funny example.
Yes, but I think it's a great example, absolutely. But for your business, I mean, I would imagine you help a lot of companies implement AI. Have you, at your consulting business, implemented AI to actually help your company?
Yeah, we're applying AI. I must also say I'm not necessarily taking my own company as the biggest, the greatest example, but let's say we are using AI to optimize also our finance processes, our operations, but also to get more insight on our clients and what is influencing their industry. Yeah. So we're using AI to scan news articles or research around the globe to compile a picture about what is happening in the ecosystem of our client in order to help them better answering their biggest challenges.
Exactly. All right, well, that sounds fascinating. I think there are many opportunities which you've shown us here, both of you, that AI can present to us in the future. I want to thank you very much for your contributions here. We really appreciate it. Some fascinating insights, so that's great to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you to all people who are watching this. We very much appreciated all your questions as well. And we also want to make sure that if you enjoyed this, there is a possibility to donate to RSM. And that actually has a couple of benefits. The primary of which is the fact that you will help students who are very talented but do not maybe have the financial means to attend RSM in the future. So if you thought this was interesting and you have the ability to donate, you can do so at rsm.nl/donate or the link which is somewhere on your screen. Now, we do recognize that some students perhaps do not have the means to donate. That's not a problem, but there's also a lot of former students, alumni, staff, other people watching. So this is primarily targeted at those people. And for those people who are students right now, we'll get back to you when you have a high-paying job, because that's probably going to happen. All right, our next open lectures are going to be on the 10th of November. It's going to be about employee well-being, and our final one is going to be on the 17th of November, and that's going to be on balancing profit and social impact. A lot of interesting topics are coming up, but thank you very much for joining us for this open lecture on AI.